Hello, this is Kade, and this is going to be the first of my buyer's guides for the IAE 2952. The goal of these buyer guides is to go over all the ships on display and, look at their capabilities and give a judgment if they are good value or not, and also see what kind of role they would fit for you as a player or in your organization. So I'll be looking at all of the ships in detail. Later on I'll take a ride out in a Corsair, provided I get one free fly, I assume I do, to just take a look at the interior space of that one. So the full verdict of that one is going to wait until after that, but I will make one based on what we know now. I will quickly run up here and take a look at where everything is located and give you a quick, very short opinion piece on all of them. So if you just want to have a quick idea if I think it's worth to have them, yes or no, that will do you, and otherwise you can just go ahead for the detailed stuff. Okay, let's start from left below. So the Cutlass series, Cutlass Black, good ship, good value. Competition comes from the Freelancer and the Spirit C1. Value-wise, Cutty is middle of the range. Freelancer, in my opinion, has a better value despite it being slightly more expensive, but it brings a whole array of doubling up in the componentry, which I think is going to be very useful. Cutlass Red suffers competition, of course, soon from the still to be announced Pisces Red. So we're going to get that one with one bat, and yeah, those are going to trade places depending on how the price is going to go. Keep in mind, if you're going to fly a Cutty Red, it's no longer a solo operation. With a Cutty Black, you can operate it solo. With a Cutlass Red, you're doing medical gameplay, you're going to need somebody to fly and somebody to take care of the patient, so you're looking at least at a two-man crew. So keep that in mind, value-wise, it's still not bad. Cutty Blue, bounty hunter ship, again, you want to run that at least probably 2-3 man operation in there. Really nice little ship for bounty hunting and has that flexibility to also bring a ground vehicle, so you can go after ground targets and all of these things. It doesn't have the best of perhaps all of the intercept options, but if you want to go for bounty hunting right now, I think it's one of the better all-round ships. So just one ship that can do most of the things. Cutlass Steel, stupidly overpriced thing, do not ever buy it. Very simple. Vulture, if you want to go into the salvaging, good value ship, 100 Vulture I think at the top of my head. Solo operation, of course. I think it's going to be a really enjoyable career if you like that idea of going out for salvaging. Of course, it being a dedicated ship, it does mean you need to be sure about that career path, because, well, the only one you're going to have is salvaging. The Cutter series, the new starter ship at $40, unbeatable. Really, really good starter ship. It shows that, as they say themselves, CIG has learned over time, and these ships are much better starter than the Aurora series or the Mustang or things like that. 100 series could be there, but they are more expensive, so if you're going to start at Star Citizen and you don't want to be spending too much money, then by all means, just go ahead and get a cutter. It's a really, really good option. The Herald, it's a data runner, it's really fast, we don't know any role for it. Currently my advice is do not buy it, we just don't know what it's really going to be. Buccaneer, medium class fighter. Medium class fighters are not in the best of place period in the game, and I'm not sure how they're going to be lasting in the new flight model, time will tell. But honestly, if you want to go for a medium class fighter, I would go for a Hornet series over a Buccaneer, simply because of the additional flexibility the Hornet offers with its weapon loadout, and also it has an ejection seat when later that of the Spaceman comes around. You do really want that. The Caterpillar, it's a really good cargo hauler. Main competition, of course, is in the form of the Hercules C2, which is more expensive, but offers additional cargo space, and the addition that it can run the Nova tanks back and forth into places. The Caterpillar currently struggles moving any vehicles because the lifts don't really work. Overall, once it is fixed, it could potentially move some smaller vehicles back and forth. In the end, though, value-wise, it's just really strong together with the C2. So if you want to go into cargo hauling career and perhaps later on have the flexibility of the promised modularity, so modules that you can slot into there instead of the cargo space, it is going to be a good buy. And it's really hard to go wrong with a Cat. Even today, it's just one of the oldest ships around that still just goes strong because it is very good at what it does. The Corsair series, of course, the finally long-awaited mid-range ship from Drake. It's finally here. Its main competition is in the form of the Origin 400 series and of course the RSI Constellation. Looking on paper, I would say that capability-wise, the Constellation is a better buy. It is about $10 cheaper, and it has better firepower. Like gun-wise, it's 50-50. They're like the Drake is probably slightly ahead gun-wise, but the Constellation, of course, makes up with that with an enormous barrage of missiles. And beyond that, they just score very much even in all of what they can do, except for the fact that the Connie has a larger cargo space. That's how I expect the Cutter is going to come in strong when it comes to the interior, because the Constellation interior, in my opinion, is really, really bad. In the lower level, I'm not going to go down there for this walkthrough. The Dragonflies, like if you want a two-man hover bike, just buy them in-game. Don't buy the small ground vehicles for real money, they're overpriced. Same for the Mule. The Kraken, of course, is the capital carrier from Drake. If you want to have one, you're playing the F5 Wars. I can say it's poor value or great value, doesn't really matter. Of course, it is going to be a ship that you're going to be running at least a decent, small orc to fully support that ship. Otherwise, there's no point in getting it. If you're just playing with you and 2-3 of your friends, the Kraken is not going to be the ship that you want to be operating. It is just going to ask for too many people to be run by anything other than a small to medium-sized orc. So let's go ahead and just take a look at the ships and go a little bit more into detail. And I think we're just going to start with the, well, Corsair, of course. I mean, it is the new edition, not new, but finally flight-ready edition to the game. And a lot of people have been waiting a long time for the ship. Now, I cannot get inside of them here in the showroom. The ramps are bugged, so you just fall through them. I can give it one more try, but I don't think it will work. You can just see here from the front profile, it is a chunky ship. There's a lot of heft to this ship. And that's the main difference for us, something like the 400 series or the Constellation. Both of those ships are relatively sleek in their design. And Drake obviously doesn't give a rat's ass about that, and it just made it as bulky as it needs to be. And I honestly think that looks better. And I am absolutely not a Drake fan. I'm definitely not a favor of their designs or their philosophies, but I cannot deny that, you know, as an overall shape, it has a better shape of a ship. And it gives it also the very important interior spacing to play around with, which is other ships, in my opinion, are lacking in. Firepower-wise comes in the form of 4 size 5 guns. I think 2 of them gimbaled here on the side and 2 here on a remote control turret. And there were 2 size 4 weapons as well, and then a battery of, I think, 8 size 3 missiles. So that's your firepower taken care of. Beyond that, it is the usual to be expected, doubling up on, you know, certain key componentry. So your coolers, fuel tanks, and all of that stuff. What it does change different over the Constellation is that it's running a size 3 shield in a single form, and I believe the Constellation runs 2 size 2 shields. Which is going to be better, time will tell. I think that overall a single size 3 is going to offer you with more hit points, but of course 2 size 2s bring in the redundancy and allows you perhaps to do some flexibility later on when they go and play around with the shields a bit more. Value-wise, the Corsair comes in at $10 more as the Constellation, so that is something to be said. I'm not taking into account the 400 series, it's Origin. So it does come in slightly more expensive than the competition, but then again at this price range, you know, at the 300 level. There we go, we got in, nice. You follow into this section here by the other ones. So. Yeah, at this price point, you know, the $10 is not going to make the difference between absolutely not buying it or getting the other one. So you really want to go with, okay, what is the ship that I want to fly? And I think that's really cool between these things. I like the cargo bay space here, of course, of the Corsair. It is a very nice and chunky space. Like, I have not seen this ship, by the way, on the interior. I've not been watching anything. We have a bunch of displays around the place, controls, and of course the classic Drake buttons, which I do actually prefer these over a lot of the touchy pad stuff that you see in all of the other ships. So I would like to see more of this sort of buttons around the place, because they just work. So this, I guess, is going to be an engineering station. We have life support here. It's very narrow in here, a bit cramped. This is a EVA hatch, so if you want to go outside with your EVA suits, which then will be stored in here, along with some weapon racks, so that's really, really nice. That's a much better layout already than the Constellation has. Gravity generator. I like this. This space is like a bit reminiscent of a Star Trek engineering area with like the warp core in the center. It even has the blue lights on it. So I'm sure that was a secret inspiration. The lounge area, very reminiscent of the Caterpillar. One of the shortfalls, I think, of Drake is like I understand that they like to keep things very simple and industrial, but it wouldn't hurt to soften up a space like this where you want to relax a little bit. It is very, very grim and dark in my opinion. Is there... Yeah. This is all the lights you get, so yeah, not the greatest fan of this. The kitchen area space, of course, is just very, very functional again. Like, there's nothing on a Drake ship that is fancy because that's not their idea. The head and apparently with the shower as well, which is leaking, so that's great. I mean, come on, Drake. You're on the showroom floor, at least make sure your ships work. And I guess these are some lockers. Oh no, these are some bedrooms. Okay, that's nice. So we have 2 beds here, so that's individual beds. 3. And this is the elevator, I guess. Go to the top floor, we'll take a look there. So we have 3 beds here. We have the 2 side turrets here. So I guess the side turrets will be like size 1 or size 2. Let's see if I can find it quickly. It doesn't say. Doesn't really matter between size 2 and 1. So 1 more bed here. This is, I guess, will be then the captain. 2 seats up here. So this is very much a flight control station. This is just going to be somebody who's just tagging along. So they don't have a immediate role, but they're just there to do other things. And when they are going to flight maneuvers, you want to be strapped in, of course. I mean, it's really not a bad ship so far. Let's go ahead and take a look on the upstairs. Okay, that goes to the surface. Ah, that goes to the roof. The lighting wasn't very great. I like the handles, I'm not gonna lie. Go up through and... I want to go to the roof. Go to the roof. I guess it isn't working. Okay. Oh, there we go. Roof. Oh, that's nice. Access to the roof, good for maintenance. Now, what I was wondering is, like, when you look outside, it would seem like there is another level there. Am I missing something? Or is this seat going down? Oh, that could be the case. Let's enter the co-pilot seat. Let's take a look. Ah, there we go. That's cool. So yeah, full co-pilot control, so you got dual people on the controls if you need to. And I guess they could take over the remote turret then from here as well. That's a good look. So yeah, value-wise, Corsair, $300. I mean, it's really gonna come down to preference, I think. I will say, if you want to spend longer times out, and you know, want to play with some people, maybe add some RPS to your playstyle, I think this ship is gonna be nicer than the Constellation. And it's purely because the Constellation interior, in my opinion, is just really, really poor. So let's see if I fall through here as well. No, this one actually works. Cool. The Constellation interior is just really poor, which doesn't really work that well, but capability-wise, I think these 2 ships are going to be very evenly matched in most regards. So, yeah, I think value-wise, I cannot say it's for value. I think it's a very good ship to have, especially if you want to be playing around with a couple of friends. This is like the level of ship that you want to be looking at. Like, you're not going to be looking at capital grade ships. You want to have something like this, where you have enough people, so you have people flying, you get some people on the guns, and you got somebody who can run around, play engineer. So like 4, 5 people, ideal if you want for a ship like this. And then of course, like if you're looking at some of the other like a 400 series, that doesn't even get to there. I like him. Strong recommendation, good all-around multi-role ship. It's gonna allow you to do a lot of things. So it's like, yeah, how does it fit into your fleet? It's like, yeah, what you want to do with it. How does it will fit within organizations? Again, organizations can always make use of good multi-role ships, especially smaller ones. If you're flying in larger orgs, I will say you probably gonna be running more dedicated ships. So that's one of those things you want to keep in mind. If you want to be optimized with a fleet for a larger organization, you're going to be running ships for dedicated roles all the time, because you just need that additional capability, and you have the flexibility to have enough ships to do that. So some people will be having dedicated cargo holders, some will have dedicated miners, some will have dedicated combat ships, and then depending on what is needed, those ships are taken out. So maybe one of the times you play like you're pilot captain in one of your own ships, and the other times you just serve as a crew member in another. Going over then to the Caterpillar. I mean, it's a Caterpillar. There's nothing to really dislike about it. Direct competition is set to the C2. The Caterpillar comes in cheaper, has a little bit less cargo space, doesn't move tanks around, but then the tanks are ugly, so yay. It's just hard to go wrong with the Cat. It's one of the oldest ships in the game. The interior is not amazing, I'm not going to go through it. It's not the greatest layout of an interior in my opinion, but it's still very much serviceable, and just capability wise, the Cat is the Cat. It just moves cargo, and it does it really well. It is a very long ship, so do keep that in mind when you're trying to land it. Sometimes it can catch you off guard a bit. Let's go ahead and take a look at the smaller options. Also, considering we just went through the interior of the Corsair, I'm not going to go and fly it. There's no really additional value for the buying guide from that regard. Like, the flight models are all going to change anyway, so they're not going to add anything. Righty-ho! Buccaneer, a set medium fighter. Fighters are really hard to point down which is good, which is bad. The meta changes a lot of the time. Personally, however, because they lack a ejection seat, so later on in the game where that becomes of importance, it may affect your choices. And it's also a relatively bulky fighter. It's small but bulky in a way. It does have the capability, of course, of bringing a really larger gun into play, which can be useful perhaps against larger targets. We'll have to see how it all plays out. Like, that's the problem when it comes to fighters in general, is that they're constantly in flux still and in regards to balancing. So it's really hard to say yay or nay on any of them. The exception, of course, being if there's really poor value. And the Buccaneer, value-wise, is very much reasonable. The Herald data runner, we just don't know what data running is going to look like, really. And without the role being in the game, I would not recommend you buy the ship. Because there's no point to it. It doesn't do you anything else that's really useful other than data running. So just leave it be, let it rest until the gameplay loop gets in, and then we can decide which ships are going to be best for that role. Because this one, outside of data running, really does nothing else. Like, you can take it into combat if you wanted to, but there are much better options for that. The Cutter, new starter ship, freaking amazing. Best starter they have. CG themselves said they learned a lot, and well, they have learned a lot. It's just a box with some engines strapped to it. It's ugly as sin, but if you need to get started in Star Citizen, this would be my recommendation, because it does have that flexibility, and flexibility is important when you don't have a lot of ships. If you don't know what you want to do yet, or you have only have 1 or 2 ships and you want to be able to do a lot of different things, period, you need to have ships that are flexible, and something like the Cutter here offers you that flexibility from a starting level. So yeah, just amazing. Good value, good ship. If you want to get going, you buy this. If you already have other ships, of course, then this is at best going to be, I'm not sure if they sell it with LTI. If they do, then this is your LTI token for the year. So there you go. LTI token if you already have ships. If you're starting out in Star Citizen, please, by all means, go ahead and start with this ship. It's not the prettiest one, but it will give you the most gameplay options. And that's what is important when you're starting out in the game. Then we have the Vulture, salvaging. I really like this ship. $140. It is, of course, a dedicated ship. So this is a ship that you buy. If you're as a solo, you decide, like, this is going to be my career and nothing else. You buy this ship. Or, of course, if you'd be flying in an organization and you need salvaging ships, then this is a really good salvaging ship to have. Of course, right now, the only salvages we have are the ginormous Reclaimer and, of course, the Vulture. So we will see some other options in between. But for the time being, these are your options, and I do think that this ship will do you really well. So, yeah, if you want to go and be a salvager, by all means buy this ship. It's good value for a dedicated single-person profession ship, and it will allow you to make a fair amount of money in the game once that profession gets fully developed and put in. So, yeah, cannot dislike it, really. Let's go ahead and take a look at the last hull, which is, of course, going to be the Cutties. It does get slightly annoying with the Drake names, I will say. Like, we have the Cutter, the Corsair, and the Cutlass. So it's Cutty, and Cutty to me. Really. Oh well. Let's take a look. Cannot dislike the old Cutties. Well, you can dislike one of them. There it is right away. Cutlass Steel, horrible, overpriced. Do not buy that ship. I don't know what CIG was on, but it had to be some really fucking good stuff. Because there's no way otherwise you would design that thing and give it that price tag. Yeah, it's really cool, but it is just utterly pointless and overpriced. If you ever want to have this thing, you probably buy it in game for much cheaper than it's sold for real life. Cutlass Blue. It is going to be your bounty hunter all-around multi-role sort of ship. Really good ship for that. Value proposition for it is nice. It's great if you want to be flying around with it. Again, probably this is a good ship for 2-3 people, maybe 4, and you can do a lot with it at a reasonably cheap price tag. Of course, this is focus. Of course, here's going to be your new combat operations. If you want to go full-on flexible, 2, maybe 3 people, you can stick, of course, to the Cutty Black. Really good value ship there. If you want to do more cargo hauling and you are alone or with 2 people, the Freelancer series is definitely better value. And also, combat-wise, if you want to have that bit more firepower things, I'd honestly go with the Freelancer over the Cutlass. It has additional componentry, which will give you additional flexibility and redundancy. Cutlass Red, it used to be a respawn point, it's no longer. Of course, it's the ambulance. I think the main struggle for me with the Red is just going to be the size. It has a fairly large profile, being a Cutlass series for a rather limited interior space. And when you're rescuing people, that may seem silly, but it is actually important. You want to be able to get into places and get people out of there and then bring them to places to deposit them to a more larger medical facility, which needs to be like have the space for you to do so. So when it comes down to a sort of medical evacuation ship, size matters. And especially in this category, because these are just with size 1 bed, so it's all about getting people stabilized and moving them to a larger, more capable facility. I honestly think that the Pisces Red is probably going to be the better option. That said, the price, of course, is going to be determining that factor, and we just don't know that one yet. So we'll have to wait and see for that. And with that, we have finished the Drake day of IAE 2952. Amazing how many of these we already had by now. It has been quite a time. So as always, Drake, of course, tends to lore-wise bring the value, and in some cases it most definitely do. When it comes to our real dollars, of course, the proposition is generally that all of the ships roughly fall in the same value category anyway, which means that sometimes a lot of the other manufacturers can be better in value for the capability. In other times it is more of a preference sort of scenario, and also like what do you want for your gameplay. If you're solo starting out, the cutter of course is gonna be unbeatable for probably the next year until they release some other starter that may overturn it. We'll have to see, wait and see. But I really think that's gonna be a really, really strong option for a long time to come. When it comes to the Cutlass series, well, I just went over them. They're vulnerable veterans now of Star Citizen. You know, all three of them are good. We're just gonna ignore the steel, it doesn't exist. Buccaneer has always been a bit in a funny place, went up and down meta-wise. We'll have to just wait and see until we get proper flight models into game and that we finally can get some idea of how the fighters are going to be ranking up. The Kraken, it is of course really expensive. It is a capital ship. If you want it, if you're on a carry option, you need to have at least a small orc, probably a medium orc, in order to effectively support and use that ship. So do keep that in mind at all times. I glossed over the Herald there. Of course, the Herald is, yeah, we just don't know yet. We don't have the gameplay for it. Same is, of course, true with the Vulture. However, salvaging should be around the corner. And once it is in, the Vulture is going to be a really good way to get going in that. Corsair, I think it's a really good ship. Good place in the value. It has a nice interior. I think it's a much nicer gameplay-wise interior than the Constellation is going to be from a more role-playing perspective. If you're just looking after raw capabilities, I think that the Constellation probably still wins out. Purely the way it is designed and built, I think it's going to win. Value-wise, it's slightly cheaper, not enough. But it has additional firepower. It brings a lot of missiles to the table, which is sort of nice. Like, if you're gonna be running this thing long range, so you're gonna be running outside the free supply depots, having a lot of missiles is actually a benefit versus just having the more limited number that the Corsair here has. Probably you can change maybe the racks for all smaller missiles, more of them that way to balance it out. Overall, I think those two are just really evenly matched, and it's gonna be a preference item. But I do think the Cutlass, not the Cutlass, the Corsair is going to be your more enjoyable multi-cruise ship than the Gunny will be. And of course the Caterpillar is the Caterpillar. It's a really good cargo hauler. We just need to wait for those modules to someday in the next 10 years show up. Who knows? Until then, just consider it to be purely a cargo hauler and use it as such. And it will do a fairly fine job at it. And it probably also, like, it's important, I forgot to think about it, like, we of course now have soft dat. So this ship may actually be nicer to loot with than a C2 will be. Simply because you can just park it on the side and have people drag stuff in through the side hatches and probably do it more efficiently, but we'll have to see through that gameplay wise. Yeah, that was Drake. Overall, I think when you look at the entire lineup, the only two ships that I say are a not recommended buy is going to be the Herald, because we just don't know how it's going to stack up and we don't have gameplay loop for it, and the Cutlass Steel because it is just stupidly overpriced. All of the other Drake ships are good value wise for their goals, for their capabilities, and so far all of the Drake ships we have, of course, except for the Kraken, they are really suitable for a player size of around 1 to 5. So that's something to definitely keep in mind. The only ship that you would use from the Drake fleet in a larger setting is going to be the Kraken and the Vulture. The Vulture because it is a dedicated ship, and dedicated ships have a lot more value in large organizations. And the Kraken, of course, it being a capital unit, it needs to be in a larger organization to begin with. All the other ships, 1 to 5 players, is going to be a really good option for you, and they allow you a lot of that flexibility, which is very important in that size category. So you can do a lot of different sorts of gameplay loops in the game, which is going to keep things interesting and fresh for you. With that, I will say goodbye for today, and I'll hope to see you again tomorrow. And let's see what our good friends of the other side of the price range of Origin will bring to us that day. Goodbye.